I was 16, trying to stay focused on my architecture sketches when my mother's voice shattered the silence. You're a failure, Mark. This is my legacy. My hotel. I ran to the staircase and saw him, my father, Mark, pale, drained, a suitcase by his side. He looked up, met my eyes, and pulled me into his arms. I'm sorry, Celine, he whispered softly. I can't stay. Then the door slammed behind him, and he was gone, leaving me and my 8-year-old sister, Mia, standing in a silence that somehow screamed louder than their argument. Have you ever felt like a stranger in your own house? Tell me in the comments. Here's ours. My grandmother, Sharon, was a legend. She began with a tiny roadside motel in Vermont and turned it into a $50 million boutique hotel empire across New England. She was the founder, the soul behind it all. My mom, Brenda, managed marketing. My dad, Mark, ran operations. They were supposed to be the dream team to carry the family torch, except Mom never loved the job. She loved the prestige it gave her. 3 months after Dad left, Mom announced her engagement. His name was Scott, a polished, smooth-talking optimization consultant who moved in almost immediately. He was all charm and promises of global expansion, constantly talking about taking the brand international. He adored Mia, played with her, helped with homework, but to me, I may as well have been invisible. A few months later, they called me into the living room. We have amazing news, Mom said, her smile bright and rehearsed. Scott and I are moving to Europe to lead the new expansion. My heart dropped. What about me? What about Mia? I asked. Mia's coming, of course, she replied casually, waving a hand. But you, Celine, don't make a scene. You're starting your senior year. It'd be ridiculous to transfer now. So where do I live? I managed to ask, my voice trembling. Mom laughed sharp and cold. You'll stay with your grandmother. She's already agreed. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. I wasn't being cared for, I was being set aside. That night, lying in bed surrounded by boxes, none of them mine, I couldn't stop wondering when I'd become a burden. Now I understand it wasn't just convenience. It ran deeper. Mom had always lived in Grandma Sharon's shadow. She resented that I loved the business, that I spent hours sketching hotel layouts, that Grandma and I spoke the same creative language. Looking back, it's clear. Pushing me away wasn't about Scott. It was jealousy. She couldn't stand being reminded of everything she wasn't. For years past, life with Grandma was peaceful, steady. I threw myself into my architecture studies, finding comfort in blueprints and structure, things that didn't fall apart. Mom rarely called. A text on Christmas, a missed birthday call. Eventually, I stopped expecting anything more. Then came my 21st birthday. That morning, Grandma called me into her study, the original office of the first hotel. The room smelled of polished mahogany and history. She looked serious, which instantly made my chest tighten. Celine, she said calmly, sit down. My mind raced. Was I in trouble? I've been watching you these past 4 years, she continued, leaning forward. You don't just look at buildings, you understand them. You have my eye and your father's integrity. She slid a thick leather folder across the desk. Happy birthday. I opened it with trembling hands, deeds, trust documents, shares. Grandma, what is this? It's the hotel chain, she said simply. It's all yours. I froze. What? No, that can't be right. Mom and Scott, they're running the expansion. They're managing a project, Grandma interrupted, her tone sharp as glass. A project I never truly approved. But the heart, Celine, the properties, the name, the spirit of what I built, that belongs to you. It always has. I stared at her, speechless. But why? Why now? Why me? She leaned back, and for the first time, I saw the weight of her decision in her eyes. You're wondering why I waited, she said quietly. I hoped Brenda would grow. I hoped my daughter would change. I gave her chance after chance. I watched her drive Mark away, and then cast you aside like you were nothing. She paused, taking a long breath. I was caught between the hope I still held for my child and the painful truth staring me in the face. But when they came to me with that reckless idea, to mortgage the flagship hotels and gamble everything I'd built, I knew my hope had been misplaced. This isn't generosity, Celine. It's justice. I can't let them destroy what generations worked for. That night, Grandma Sharon gave me one last piece of advice. Call your father, Celine. Speak to him not just as your dad, but as a consultant. He knows those hotels better than anyone. And there's more to that story than you realize. It took me a week to gather the courage. We decided to meet at a quiet little cafe downtown. The moment I saw him, my chest ached. He looked older, worn down, silver threading through his hair. But when our eyes met, his lit up with that same warmth I remembered from childhood. The first few minutes were awkward, polite chatter about my classes and the weather. But soon, I couldn't keep it bottled up any longer. I told him everything, the last 4 years, the move, and finally, Grandma's gift. He listened silently, both hands wrapped around his coffee cup. When I finished, he drew in a long, uneven breath. Celine, he said, voice trembling, there are things you need to know about the divorce. He told me how my mother, Brenda, had belittled him for years, how nothing he did ever measured up, how obsessed she'd become with status while he cared only about the craft of running good hotels. But the affair, Dad? I finally asked. Mom always said you left because of that. That's you. His expression hardened. The affair wasn't mine, he said quietly. It was hers. I froze. What? Mom. She was seeing Scott long before I walked out. I suspected it for months, but I didn't want to believe it. His voice dropped. It all came to a head, not just at home, but at work. That's the part no one knows. He paused. Here's the real twist. I wasn't just pushed out of the house, Celine. I was forced out of the company. My breath caught. What do you mean, Mom and Scott? They set me up, he said bitterly. They arranged a series of shady transactions, small enough to seem believable, big enough to look like theft or incompetence. They took it to the board, your grandmother's board, and had me fired. Ruined. I felt sick. But why didn't you fight back? Why didn't you tell Grandma? Why just disappear? He looked at me then, eyes full of sorrow and love. Because of you and Mia, he said softly. Fighting would have dragged everything into the public, the affair, the lies, the dirty deals. She threatened to call me unstable, to paint me as a thief, and use you girls as weapons. I couldn't let that happen. I thought it would be kinder if I just left. We sat there for a long time, neither of us speaking. It felt like someone had dropped 50 pounds of lead onto my chest. My entire childhood, the version of events I'd been told, shattered. My father, the failure. My mother, the victim. None of it was true. He hadn't abandoned us. He'd been framed and exiled. Word spread quickly, too quickly, that I was the new owner. 2 days later, I was studying in the living room when the doorbell rang. When I opened it, my stomach twisted. There stood my mother, Brenda, with Scott right beside her. Celine, sweetheart, Mom cried, rushing forward and crushing me in a perfume-soaked hug. Oh, darling, I've missed you so much. Look at you. She swept past me into the house, Scott trailing close behind, flashing that same insincere grin. Your mother's been beside herself, Celine, he said smoothly. We heard the wonderful news. Mom turned, eyes wide and unnaturally bright. I was so shocked that Grandma put all this responsibility on your shoulders, she said, her voice syrupy. Baby, it's too much for you. That's why we came back. She clasped my hands eagerly. We have the perfect plan. You'll move in with us, and we'll run the company together. A true family business, just like it was always meant to be. I pulled my hands away. No, Mom. I'm not going anywhere. I'm happy here, with my school, with Grandma. Her smile didn't falter, but the corners of her mouth tightened. Well, she said coolly, if you won't move, that's fine. Scott and I were just talking. We'll move back here instead. We'll sell the city house, she said brightly. It'll be just like the old days. Wouldn't that be wonderful? I didn't answer. I just stared at her. The woman who once tossed me aside like I was nothing, now standing in my grandmother's living room, desperate to claw her way back in. No, I said finally. My tone was calm, but it sliced through her fake enthusiasm. It's not going to be like old times. Celine, stop being so dramatic, she snapped, the sugary tone vanishing. This is a huge opportunity for us. I have a question, I said quietly. The air seemed to freeze. I looked straight at her. Mom. Her smile faltered. The brightness in her eyes dimmed. Everything in her expression just stopped. What? She whispered. Why was Dad fired? I asked, my voice growing stronger with every word. Why did you tell me he cheated when you were sleeping with Scott before he ever left? Why did you frame him? Why did you lie to me? Her mask didn't just slip, it shattered. Her face flushed an angry red. How dare you, she shrieked, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. You ungrateful little brat. After everything I've done for you, you're going to stand there and believe that failure over me? I gave you everything. Her fury was uncontained now. She marched toward me, jabbing a finger at my face. This company, this house, they're mine. They were always supposed to be mine. That's enough, Brenda. Grandma Sharon's voice wasn't loud, but it hit my mother like a slap. She had been standing in the doorway to her office, watching the entire scene unfold. Mother spun around. Tell this ungrateful child what she owes me. Grandma walked slowly into the room, her gaze steady and unflinching. The only thing she owes you, Brenda, Grandma said, is nothing. Respect isn't given, it's earned. You threw her away. You don't get to claim her now that she's worth something. She stopped inches away from my mother. You're not welcome here. And regarding the company, my lawyers will contact you about your attempt to mortgage the core hotel assets. Scott's face drained of all color. I think it's time for you to leave, Grandma said softly, but there was more power in her quiet voice than in any scream. My mother just stared at her, speechless. I could see the fury, the shame, and the panic warring across her face. Finally, with a sound that was half sob, half growl, she spun on her heel and stormed out. Scott hurried after her. The front door slammed shut, and the silence that followed was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. After that day, Grandma Sharon was done giving out second chances. She hired a private investigation firm. A few weeks later, she called me and Dad into her study. The investigator, a sharp, no-nonsense woman in a tailored blazer, was already there. A thick, bound report sat on the desk. It's worse than we imagined, Grandma said grimly. The investigator laid out everything. Scott wasn't just incompetent, he was a seasoned con artist. He had a string of aliases across multiple states. His pattern was always the same. Charm wealthy women, persuade them to invest in fake expansion projects, and then siphon the money into offshore shell accounts before vanishing. The so-called European expansion he'd been pitching with my mother? It was just another scam. A $7 million one. And he was using her as his inside source, leveraging my grandmother's empire to bankroll it. My stomach turned. So she wasn't just his girlfriend, I whispered. She was his partner in crime. Grandma looked at me, her eyes heavy with pain. It appears so, Celine. Whether she realized it or not, the evidence ties her directly to Scott's criminal operations and a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. My dad filed for full custody of Mia right away. I insisted on being present in the courtroom. Watching it unfold was brutal. My mother, Brenda, took the stand and played the helpless victim flawlessly. Tears streamed down her face as she told the judge how Mark had abandoned us, how he was unstable, how he'd never cared. Her lawyer doubled down, portraying my father as a bitter, washed-up executive. Then our lawyer stepped forward. He didn't just show proof that my dad was stable or reveal the alimony checks my mom had happily cashed. He brought out the private investigator's report. Calmly, he read through Scott's list of fake identities and explained the fraud investigation happening in another state. He presented bank records showing Scott's attempts to mortgage the core hotels and the wire transfers he'd already set up, all co-signed by my mother. I watched her face crumble in real time. The fake tears stopped instantly. The mask of a grieving wife slipped away. Her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then to raw, furious rage. She started shouting, "This is all lies. They're turning you against me. He loves me." But the judge struck his gavel hard, his expression unmoved. The truth, cold, undeniable, and fully documented, was out at last. An hour later, it was done. The judge awarded my father full, immediate custody of Mia. He called Scott a predator and ordered a criminal investigation into both him and my mother, Brenda, for conspiracy to commit fraud. I saw my mother collapse into her chair, her face pale with the realization that her web of lies had finally unraveled. For a brief second, I almost pitied her, almost. The downfall came fast. True to form, Scott vanished the day after the hearing, taking every last penny of my mother's savings with him. The final verdicts, both in the fraud case and in family court, were swift. My mother, Brenda, the woman who'd always been on the receiving end of money, was now ordered to pay child support to my father. The irony was almost poetic. A few weeks later, Dad called. His voice sounded worn but steady. "Hey, Celine, just wanted you to know, your mother came by my apartment today." My stomach tightened. "What? What did she want?" "She said she wanted to make amends," he replied, disbelief lacing his words. "She cried, said she'd made a huge mistake, that Scott had deceived her, and she wanted us to be a family again." I stayed silent, waiting. "I told her no," he said firmly. "I told her that ship hadn't just sailed, it had sunk. I told her I'd never put you or Mia through that again." I exhaled, a deep, trembling breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "Good," I said softly. "Good for you, Dad." After the call, I sat in my room at Grandma's house, staring at the blueprints for my final college project. I used to believe family was unbreakable, something bound by blood, something you couldn't escape no matter what. But I've learned something harder and truer. Real family isn't about shared DNA. It's about the people who would bleed for you. It's where you heal, not where you're hurt. Sometimes, letting go of a toxic blood tie is the only way to truly find yourself. Life slowly began to take shape again, in the best way. I graduated from architecture school at the top of my class. My dad, Mark, became interim CEO of the hotel chain, and under his care, the business finally thrived. Mia moved in with him, and for the first time in years, she was just a happy, carefree kid. Every Sunday, we all gather for dinner at Grandma Sharon's. Last week, I brought my final project with me. I rolled out the blueprints across the dining table. "It's a new design," I said nervously. "Fully sustainable, built using the concepts I've been researching." Grandma, Mia, and Dad leaned closer to study it. Dad examined the plans, then looked up at me with a slow, proud smile. "This is the future, Celine," he said, his eyes shining. I looked around the table, at my grandmother, my father, and my sister. This wasn't the family I began with.